And go.
Hello again, Spoilercon attendees, and welcome back. This panel is called Coasting Through the Cosmere. We are going to be discussing Brandon Sanderson's work, given that Fox and Raven Media has a Mistborn spoilers podcast. We thought it would be fun to take a step aside from the Wheel of Time for a little while and talk about Mistborn Plus, so Mistborn and the Cosmere. That means that if you are not a reader, if you don't know what the Cosmere is, if you haven't read Brandon Sanderson, you might want to step out of this panel because you will be spoiled. One thing you will not be spoiled on is the fourth book in the Stormlight Archive series, Rhythm of War, is in preview chapters, but is not yet published. And therefore we will not be discussing anything from that book. Please keep those kinds of comments out of the YouTube chat as well for those who are waiting for the book to come out before they dive in. So with that being said, we are joined by three great panelists. They are all from the Fox and Raven Media Discord server who helped moderate our Mistborn conversations and are very knowledgeable about Mistborn and the Cosmere. So I'm going to ask each of you to just introduce yourselves and let us know, like, what's your history with the Cosmere? Maybe give us your favorite book or series in the Cosmere. Why don't we go ahead and start with Cody?
Hey, my name is Cody, or the Codex on the Discord. I'm one of the people on the Discord that actually got introduced the backwards way to Wheel of Time. I came from Sanderson's work, and then because of that, found out about Wheel of Time. So I'm first and foremost a Cosmere guy. I love the Cosmere. Probably my favorite book or series is going to be Stormlight Archive, and the Oathbringer is my favorite out of those.
Great, good to have you. Let's go to Moradin.
Hey everybody. I don't really do moderation, I guess, but I do. But I hang out in the Cosmere section a lot more than I used to. I was introduced to Brandon when it was announced that he was finishing up Wheel of Time, and I think it was after Gathering Storm that he put out a little short story about. It was a versus Kelsier and Moiraine, and just reading that, it kind of intrigued me. Like, okay, why is this character dead? So I picked up Mistborn, and holy crap! So I guess if I have to choose a favorite, it's Mistborn or Stormlight, really.
Great, and then we have Murtaugh.
Hi, I'm Murtaugh. I hang out and I mod on the farm channel, I guess, somewhat. And my history with the Cosmere, I mean, I finished Wheel Time probably 4-5 years ago, and I just dove right into Mistborn series after I finished Wheel of Time, and I just ripped through the Cosmere, and I've reread it multiple times since then. Everything I can get a hold of, and pretty standard story for a Wheel of Time fan, but that's pretty much it.
Great, well, thanks for joining us. I'm Talir, and I'm just going to moderate the panel so we can hear from these guys. So let's start out with just kind of talking very broad picture about the Cosmere. It's this, really intricate world, interconnected by books across many different series. You may not even know that it is there if you just pick up Mistborn or Elantris. So I'm really curious about, what about the Cosmere draws you? What do you love most about the Cosmere?
Me personally, I love that every single time I read it, I find so much new stuff that I missed in the previous reread. That's a favorite for me, is how much I miss reading it every time.
I feel you on that one. It's huge, and there's so much just interconnection between these books after you've read them the first time around.
Yeah, for me, I love that it's ongoing. Like that we can't do a Cosmere spoilers podcast full yet because it's still ongoing and there's mysteries to be solved and there's so much more to figure out. And I mean, we have Brandon to thank, who's the incredible planner and outliner, that we get this beautifully interconnected, massive world to enjoy.
Can you give me an example of like one of those cases where you saw connections maybe on a reread that you hadn't seen before?
find a good example, I think, would just be rereading the Stormlight Archive for like maybe it was the third time I had reread what we have up to this point, and realizing that Captain Azur in Oathbreaker is Vivenna from Warbreaker. It just blew my mind.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
why.
oh, sorry, Cody.
Right. Yeah, it's why I love to like almost like I love to do a full listen to up to each new book, but then you almost need to, after a new book in the Cosmere, need to go back and re-listen again, because like this last listen going up to Rhythm of War coming out just post Oathbreaker, you find even in Mistborn and other things, the realmatic theory that we get introduced to, all these little bits of how the whole Cosmere works, and you pick up more things in the others books, and you can start even piecing together just more and theorize more, and like, well, knowing this, how will this investiture play with this investiture, and what do you get when you cross them? And
For me, Hoyd was the big thing for me. But the thing that broke my brain and started me going back through all the books to start finding these little things was Nightblood in Words of Radiance.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to see the way in which characters from other books just show up. And if you've read those other books, you're like, ah, and if you haven't, they're just cool characters. And so and then it's sort of fun to think about it the reverse way of, maybe you discover that character in their original book, but later. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about who would make the best buddy cops in the Cosmere. If you're going to pick two characters, preferably from different series, who would make the best buddy cops?
My honest opinion, I really like Vivenna and Lift, because Vivenna is used to having that little crazy little sister, and it's been a while since she's had one, so she'd probably just be very happy to have Lift around with her, liftness. Lift just running all over, stealing food. Probably just accidentally find something that there's going to go in, investigate and find something crazy going on at the end of that tunnel.
Cody, how about you?
for me, I go to a classic comedy duo, Wayne and the Lopin. I think they would make a hilarious duo together between the stealing of accents and the interactions that would happen there, and Wayne trying to copy the Lopin's accent, and then the Lopin having an attitude about that, and Chowda, and it would just be a great time, I think.
Do you think they'd be able to get anything done?
They would get drinking done. They would definitely, I think they would get stuff done, but it would be their own shenanigans. They would go out and infiltrate some group and do something ridiculous that wouldn't necessarily be of great importance, but they would have a blast doing it, and probably cause big headaches for Kelsier for Cal and Wax in the process.
How about you?
Not as like a tertiary character choice, but like I just chose Vin and Kaladin just because it'd be effective. I think Vin would be a good a pick me up for Kaladin. I picture like a TNT gritty drama cop thing. Like she stops by his apartment in the morning, get up, stop moping, we got stuff to do, and something like that. But they'd just be an effective duo.
I like that. I think that team would be just marginally more effective than the Wayne and the Lopin, but perhaps would stumble into the scenarios and solve cases, or maybe they're the ones that get sent in to take care of things. So I like that very much. So let's talk about kind of a different kind of pairing. Instead of pairing up characters to fight together, let's talk about characters facing off. So how about, let's talk about cage matches. Who would win in a cage match with all their powers? Let's start with Kelsier versus Kaladin. Who wins?
Now the real question, I think, is with Kelsier, is he just coming in before the match and just slitting Cal's throat, or going straight into the fight, going to an actual one-on-one fight?
You guys.
Yeah, Kelsier does have a few, I think, distinct advantages. With ATM, obviously, that's a huge plus for him. But I think his biggest advantage is his long-range attack potential with coin shooting. But Cal does have the potential to redirect those with his surge binding. So it's if the combination of that long-range attack and having the ATM to know when to use it would Kelsier be able to take full advantage of that. Because if not, then if Cal can get in close, then that's where he is definitely stronger and has higher regenerative properties than Kelsier does.
Yeah.
I think in an actual cage match, I'd I'd give it to a Radiant every time, just because summoning a Shardbait in a cage, you're not gonna have much chances. But in an open fight somewhere, it'd be more difficult. But I still think, I mean, they're both mobile. The ATM is an advantage, but I just think the Radiant healing is gonna win in a fight in the long run.
Okay, so Murdaugh, definitely Kaladin. Cody? Nick?
If it's just an empty cage, it's got to go Kaladin. If there's bits of metal lying around, then I'd give it to Cal.
Okay. And how about you, Morden?
If it's a straight one-on-one fight, I do have to give it to Kaladin, although Kelsier would give him a lot of trouble.
So the chat has pointed out that Brandon Sanderson has actually weighed in on this particular question. And Brandon has said that with all the powers of being a Mistborn, Kelsier would win the cage match.
Oh, wow.
I can see that.
Now, it doesn't mean that we can't theorize otherwise or think about the conditions under which Kaladin might be able to win. But you know, if this is word of Brandon, then maybe we'll kind of accept that as the outcome here. All right.
If he brings Duralumin in, then that's
yeah.
Right.
And then there's also questions of Era 2 spoilers.
He could just riot Kaladin's depression and leave him.
So sad.
Low blow, but yes. Let's think about a different one. Let's talk about Yasna versus Vin. Another case of a Mistborn versus a Radiant.
And both willing to use underhanded tactics.
What do you think?
This one is it's so different, even though they're, you got two Radiants versus two Mistborn because of Yasna's ability to just change the air. It's like what Vin is powerful, but what kind of counter does she have against Yasna turning the air into oil and lighting her on fire? It's like...
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I felt as well. Like an Else Caller, besides just being able to run away immediately into an almost different dimension. I thought that as well. Like her surge binding is just, or her transformative powers are just too much to overcome. But now the chat's telling me that Kelsier would beat Kaladin according to Brandon. I'm not so sure because Vin is supposed to be some goddess warrior of death. She's pretty effective in what she does.
Yeah, she's very creative with what she does. I mean, she's the one who beat Adium without it.
She defeated the Lord Ruler, the most powerful person in the Cosmere, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of a situation. They both have almost an instant kill power, but would they both would Vin instantly go for it? Because it could kind of be a mutual destruction thing. But if Vin, I feel like she likes to evaluate a little bit, and that hesitation, if she didn't instantly go for the kill, then yeah, Yasna's ability to just change the air around her into something that would instantly kill her, what decides it for me.
Are there any other characters that you'd love to see fight? Like just to watch, not necessarily figure out who you'd put a bet on to see who would win. But any other characters that you would love to see fight each other?
I guess if it comes down to it, Wayne and Lopin as well.
That would be interesting. I think Lopin would be much more willing to do a killing blow than Wayne. Into that.
And with those, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it might just evolve into a drinking match again.
Different ways to fight.
It's almost a question of like, what powers would I like to see fight what powers?
Yeah.
And I think I'm partial to Warbreaker, so I'd like to see someone with a lot of breath fight someone like a Mistborn or something like that. I think that'd be interesting. It's something we don't consider because we don't see it as much.
Oh, definitely. Like Susabron, or maybe old Vasher himself against, heck, even Wax.
Yeah.
Right.
It's an interesting part. We don't really get to see, I think, enough of the battles in Warbreaker to kind of really get a sense of what that magic can do. Maybe in the mythical Warbreaker sequel, we'll get more of that.
One day.
Cody, how about you? Did you have a wish list for characters?
I have a few that I think would be interesting. Like, I would love to see kind of Dalinar fight two people. I would like to see a Dalinar in his prime fight Adolin, just out of curiosity, like who truly is the better duelist. But then I would love to see like Dalinar fight Zale. I'm having, why is my brain? My brain is not working.
I mean, the man has a lot of different names, so.
Yeah, it's like, I would love to see like Zyle. There we go. That's the right pronunciation. Zyle and Dalinar fight, just to see like, yeah, like what is their swordsmanship like? Because Dalinar is kind of in the way Vin is, Dalinar has been cultivated to be an ultimate warrior kind of guy. And so I just love to see that. And then a really more random one is a Khandra versus an Amian. Like the transformative powers between the two of them could be a really interesting bet.
I wonder who would be better able to spot the other. Like, that's a question for you. Would Khandra have more advantages in spotting Amians or Amians in spotting Khandras?
I think the Khandra would win that.
Yeah.
The Khandra are a little more complete as a person rather than the Amians.
That's true. There's usually a few depictions of Amians running around. Let's actually, why don't we talk about some Amians then? Let's play a little game of Spot the Amian. And tell me where have we seen some, other than the actual Amian characters, right? Like Axes the Collector. Where have we seen some Amians show up? And for those of you that don't know what Amians are, they're a group of beings. I'm not going to call them people, but a group of beings from Amia that show up in the Stormlight Archive and possibly elsewhere.
Well, I mean, there's two types of Amians. So you've got the ones like Axes who are just a whole person, but have something very off about them. And then you have the Amians that we're on about that are everywhere, literally.
Yeah, the sleepless Amians that are essentially made up of like small Kremling-like creatures.
Yeah,
I know we saw one in Kaladin's prison at one point.
Mm-hmm.
See, I don't even know what Morden's talking about. He's always picking up that stuff. But yeah, I mean, especially the formless Amians, they could be anywhere. There's so much, and how can you guess?
Yeah.
I know we see one when Shallan is like as a younger child, like in some of her flashbacks, when she's she's like in her garden kind of experimenting, you see there's mention of them, and it kind of makes you wonder if her older brother, like it is like the bane of Amian existence, always pulling the leg off
Oh God.
the Kremlings he finds.
Oh no.
Does he know something? Does he know what's going on, and that's his defense to keep the house safe from spies?
That's a
Now that's a loony theory. I like it.
That is very worrisome there.
It doesn't bode well for his future. No.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say the main thing to when you're looking for Amiens is any one that's described as looking kind of odd compared to what they're normally looking for, or one that's literally just focused on for more than 5 seconds.
Right. Yeah, I think readers are now sort of primed that anytime they see Kremlings mentioned, it's sort of like highlight that paragraph and see is that just a Kremling or is it an Amien? I think my favorite one is when Hoyd is sort of delivering a monologue to a Kremling, and it comes across as just him just pontificating as he is like to do, but then it's when you think about it, you're like Hoyd would know what Amiens are. Hoyd would know that could possibly be an Amien, which makes more sense in that context. Those are the little tidbits that Sanderson puts in that I think are so fascinating. So we're getting a question from the chat that I want to bring up. They want to know if you think that it says Kelsier is going to go full villain at some point.
Yeah, I think we've talked. I think I've talked to people about that recently. I think what we see at the end of Secret Histories, how Vin speaks to him. I'm not being exact here, but she kind of talks to him about how I don't really think you know what love means, Kelsier, and you're a very selfish person. I mean, Vin loves him regardless, but maybe not a villain streak, but antagonistic in the future of the Cosmere.
I could definitely see that. As has been mentioned by Brandon himself, if circumstances had been different, he would have been the villain of the story to begin with. But as it is, with recent words of Brandon, apparently immortality has a small drawback of insanity after a long while, as demonstrated by our lovely friends, the Heralds.
Right.
He covers a lot of pain with a lot of humor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, more than necessarily like villain on the level of like AT or ODM or something, he's going to become more like the anti-Hoyd. Hoyd is someone who as he tells Shallan, he's waiting for the right moment to nudge the boulder, and he's kind of he's alluded to Kelsier kind of being one of those problematic people even back in Mistborn, that Kelsier is also looking, but he's going to do it at the wrong time and not necessarily see the repercussions. And he wants to be out there meddling and punching gods, and exacting his anger on the universe for what they put him through. But unlike Hoyd, who has a much deeper understanding, will he do it correctly, or will he get too wrapped up and put himself at odds with the good of the greater Cosmere?
Let's stay on this kind of subject of villains for a second. How well do you think that Sanderson does in developing his villains? And certainly in the Wheel of Time, right, you have some very well-developed villain characters. And so I'm just kind of curious, like, do the villains of the Cosmere speak to you in the same way? And who's your favorite villain in the Cosmere?
AT did nothing wrong.
Very true. Honestly, there's a lot of villains that you do have certain characters like Straff who are very the cackling, ha ha ha, I'm evil type. But then you also have ones that you see where they're coming from. And like the Lord Ruler, he at least made attempts, even if he screwed up all the time while he was going through that.
Yeah, the Lord Ruler is definitely a very compelling one because, he did some messed up stuff. And his greatest flaw, I'd say originally, is that, he's coming from a place of anger and jealousy towards non-Terrace people. But he still did have the best intent for the overall world in mind and trying to save it. But by the time we see him, it's been 1,000 years of ruin in his head, just slowly driving him insane. And it's like, if you didn't have that influence on him, what would the world have looked like? Would it be as bad, or it's hard to say, like, would it have still been quite as bad, or would he have been nicer over time? Would things have been a little more hospitable to everyone? Or
how about you, Marta? You have a favorite villain?
Favorite villain? There's like they said, there's the two kinds of villains. There's the mortal and then the forces of nature villains in the Cosmere. Personally, I'll just pick a human. My favorite villain, I think, I'll pick this out, is maybe Denth in Warbreaker, who just turns into a villain so late, and you just realize he's been manipulating not just Vivenna, but the reader the whole book. I really like that. I like the turnaround, the twist in that villain.
Yeah. Any other particularly compelling villains?
I'm still really intrigued by Odium. It's like, yeah, the dichotomy of what is he? He calls himself passion, and is he truly passion, or is he anger? Like what? And what does that mean for his character? How has he possibly been influenced by other like his whole backstory as a whole in Rashik, like going back to the shattering.
Anger is a form of passion, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, with Odium, it seems like if he wants to call himself passion, he's very much the extremes of all these emotions that gets to a point where it's bad. Love becomes lust, anger becomes hate, and so forth and everything. I know I'll probably get a lot of flack for this, but I rather enjoy Moash. Let's be honest, he legitimately has his issues, and while yes, it was messed up what he did in Oathbringer, at the same time, it's not like he knew everything that was going on with El-Hokar and him trying to get better. All he knew was this man had ruined his life when he was younger.
Either of you guys want to defend Moash as a villain, or I guess Morgan is defending him. Any of you want to attack Moash?
I mean, he is. Brandon has done an excellent job writing him. It's like, and you can understand where he's coming from, but doesn't make me like him anymore.
I can understand where he's coming from, but it's unnecessary how much I hate him. I don't know.
Yeah. It's like, I feel so torn by the idea of a Moash redemption arc. It's just like, if it happens, he better be dead by the end of it. He better not get a pass out of this and be able to move on. Like, and it's just, it's such, but I mean, like that could have been Kelsier or Kaladin, or, any of those,
any member of Bridge 4, really.
Yeah. So it is one of those things where it's like, you understand where he's coming from. And it is, it's like, because, he's written to a degree specifically in a way to make us see him as a villain, but I think we'll just have to see what it comes and how we feel about it then. But
it's a sign of a great character, right? It's one that you feel that strongly about, that you come to hate the character. You can appreciate the writing and the character development even if you really, really hate the character. I think when I think of Moash, I think of Gawain from the Wheel of Time and how many people hate him for different reasons. But
character development can be backwards.
Yes, right. That's you can't feel hate towards a poorly written character, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I do think that that's sort of an interesting thing about Moash. Let's talk about the powers of investiture and all of its forms. And if you were able to have let's start just saying Mistborn for now, but any allomantic or ferochemical power, what powers would you want to have? No Mistborns, like you got to pick.
I think for allomancy, I'd have to go with pewter. I just want to live. I'm not trying to fight anybody. I'd like the ability to heal, and being stronger would be cool too.
Okay.
Allomantic, I'd probably go with brass. It's not a control thing. It's more just I've had issues with people who like to go off on me, and I would just like to smooth them down just a little bit so they can actually talk to me instead.
I think that's one of the like more, it's particularly useful in regular life if people don't know that you have it. They just think that you're a very calming presence. How about you, Cody?
It's such a hard choice, but I think it'd come down to one of either like iron or steel. I can't decide if I'd rather push or pull the metal, but it'd be one of those, I think, because I guess probably pushing, get that more flight ability than you get with pulling. But
what about fair chemical powers? What would you want?
I'd have to go with steel. That speed is just too OP. It's overpowered. It's awesome.
What would you do with your added speed, Murtaugh?
Get rid of my car and insurance bill.
You still have to run all those miles, though. You just get there really fast.
Yeah, so it's Furukami. You store it up. You walk slow for a few hours after.
Okay.
I would personally go with bronze. It's one that I can store while I'm asleep and lets me stay up and play the games that I've been waiting to play and don't have time for during the day.
That'd be particularly useful during a Spoilercon.
Oh,
You need
agreed.
to stay up really late. So I definitely see the value in that one. How about you, Cody?
zinc or copper? I'm kind of leaning towards zinc, though, as helpful as it would be to be able to remember stuff a little better. I like zinc, having that enhanced mental speed, being able to like, when the time arises, or maybe an intense gaming session, be able to overclock the brain a bit and have that advantage.
Right.
Break your poor DM.
I have plenty of times where I can be dumb and have a slowed down mental capacity to charge up that ability. So
I just thought about, are god medals allowed here? Because I'd definitely be an ATM Frucamus then.
I was thinking about when you were saying about Dungeons & Dragons about chromium, which gives you the ability to store fortune. So you could either just have bad fortune during the day and then save it up for a Dungeons & Dragons game and then just roll natural 20s over and over again. Or one game roll ones and the next game roll 20. You could just basically pick, like if you don't really care, you could store it or spend it. I think that would probably also be cheating, but definitely been a few times in my games when that would have been useful.
Yeah, fortune's a very odd attribute because Hoyd uses that to figure out where he needs to go. He just doesn't know why he needs to be there.
Right.
Yeah, that's one I want to see explored more at some point. Maybe, hopefully, we'll see in Air 3 and Mistborn his fortune getting used a bit more.
Okay, what about if you were twinborn? What combination of powers would you want?
This is a tough question. There's so many combinations there, but I think I always thought a cool a twinborn fighting prowess would be what is it? What would it be? Chromium and steel leecher. So you'd be the perfect sidekick. Just run around a room real quick, steal everyone's allomancy, and let someone else take care of it.
I know that for a lot of people, they would definitely go heavily on double gold, but I think for me, I would definitely be more pewter, allomancy, steel, Furukami. The only thing I wouldn't be able to do would be flying at that point as a superhero or villain.
Do you think that you would be a villain, Morden?
Maybe a little bit.
Yeah, well, Wax has a good combination, with his coin shot and then increasing his weight to increase his pushes. I think I'd want to keep the steel for my alchemy, but once again, I kind of go back to zinc, because with that increased mental speed, you're kind of getting some of those advantages of ATM in a sense, where you can process it a little faster, and you could bring in stuff almost like Captain America. You could be able to calculate ricochets and using your steel pushing in unique ways that the average user just wouldn't have the mental capacity to process like you could.
Have you ever seen the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think of it a lot like that with Zinc.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's just really fascinating the way in Sanderson's world, like you have all these powers laid out and you can really think through the different combinations and what kinds of effects that they would have. It just provides a lot of interesting fodder for thought. Let's change gears a little bit and start talking about like what we're looking forward to in the future, or things about the series that we might change. So let's start with this. Tell me about a minor plot point or character relationship that you would change. Let's say that you were talking with Brandon pretty early on. We're not talking about major changes in the structure of anything, but just sort of a minor plot point or character relationship that you would have been you would change if you had the ability to do so.
One I thought of was the relationship between Vin and Zane in the Well of Ascension. I never really bought it. I'm fine with Zane as like an opponent, a foil, an antagonist, but I just never really bought the will she won't she with Vin and Zane from that book.
Mm-hmm.
I had a couple, both involving Wayne and Renette for one.
Oh yeah.
Let him get the hint earlier on. She needs to be left alone so that she can have her lovely relationship going, and he can get on with, his 600-year-old girlfriend. And then also Wayne and Steris. Leave Steris alone. She is wonderful.
Steris is definitely a character that I came around on pretty late. Was that your experience with her as well, or did any of you love her from the beginning?
When I first read Alloy of Law, I had another year and a half or so before the next two books came out. So it's like, are we really going to have him get with her, or is he going to go with someone who actually kind of appreciates what he does? But after reading Shadows of Self and Bands of Mourning and going back, it's like you can see the early hints of, oh, this is actually really good for him. And she's just wonderful as it is.
Yes, Steris gets more character development than almost anyone in that entire series, from book 1 to 3.
Cody, how about you? We didn't hear from you about your plot point or character relationship that you would change.
So kind of two things come to mind. I wish Osier had a little bit more presence in Air 2, and maybe even like a little bit of a POV from him. I would have liked to seen like how he and the Kandra people had their growth as a people had happened in that time, and working with Harmony, like what were their lives like. I would have liked to get a little bit more from his perspective and all that.
Sorry, I think you're actually thinking Tensoon. I would have liked some more Orsur because he lasted about 5 minutes into Well of Ascension.
You're right. Okay. Yep. Okay. Yep. Tensoon. Getting my Kandra mixed up. Okay. Good call. And then, shoot, what was the other one? There's like a few villains I wish would have been just slightly less. Like, I wish like Sadius had been just a little bit less of a prick. It's like give me a little bit more to work with here. Like, besides just like, I don't like you, and it's just because you're just like an absolute prick, and you're very much written to not be liked. It's like, give me a little more to work with, man.
So this is a question I wanted to ask about you guys. Was we always talk about with the Wheel of Time loony theories, and a lot of the conversation on the server, the Discord server, has to do with theories. So I kind of want you guys to pitch, like, what's your pet theory? It may not be loony, but what's your pet theory that you hold about it in the Cosmere, or any part of it?
I have, since the moment I finished it, I've been like desperately hoping that in the fourth book of Era 2, that the bands of mourning get forged into Vindication 2 and become waxes. Done. That has been like my desperate deep hope, even though I know it won't happen. But I'm like, how cool would that be? Like, but yeah.
My loony theory, it's like loony, baseless. It's just what I want, I'm sure. Is that Thydakar, the leader of the Ghost Bloods, will be revealed to be Spook eventually.
No, I understand. There are some hints on that one. Probably the craziest one that I have at the moment is just Eatil. We haven't seen her since Words of Radiance, and then we suddenly have this new character that wants to hang around Shallan all the time by the name of Ishna. She wears heavy makeup, possibly to hide scars from having a mask that's grown into her face.
What do you guys think? Plausible?
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a couple of questions that I want to take from the YouTube chat. So here's one for you. If we could posit the idea that Hoid somehow got into the Wheel of Time, who would be your candidates for Hoid from the Wheel of Time? Stumped you.
Yeah.
See, I'm worse with names from Wheel of Time. But what's the guy that's always with Matt? His like second in command.
Yeah. Talmanis. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. Yeah, because we don't get a ton of his perspective. It could be Olver. Lots of speculation on who Olver actually is. A lot of thoughts that he could be Geidel Kane, maybe Olver is Hoid. Maybe a little too active in the events for a Hoid character. But I like the idea of young Hoid acting as Olver.
Something I could possibly see, just because of how much he has done in his past, Androl. He doesn't go out of his way to cause harm for anybody either.
I like the Androl idea because we know that Androl was kind of Brandon Sanderson's character that he, kind of put in and gave an elevated role to. And so certainly that's something, although Hoy doesn't usually get an elevated role in most stories. I like that idea as well. Murtaugh, you got one?
It's tough to pick a person. I just picture Hoy just being some unassuming brown, just quietly watching everything and button in when it suits him.
Yeah. He could just be one of the random Aes Sedai on the battlefield. Or, maybe Hoid is Varen.
Yeah, that would be right.
As they say on the podcast, Varen knows, and Hoid often knows too. So
she didn't really die. She just made it look like it and ran off.
I love it. Okay. Let's take some other questions from the YouTube panel. So some of the listeners are interested in your sort of predictions for either Lost Metal or Stormlight 5. Again, not using any Rhythm of War spoilers, but what are your boldest predictions for what to expect in the next stages of the Cosmere?
The one that I hate the most, Adolin dying.
Okay. Why?
Just he's best boy. He's doing his best for everybody, and he's doing something that nobody else has managed to do so far with Maya Lauren. And just, unfortunately, I don't see him surviving to the back 5.
You guys, Cody, Murtaugh, are you also worrying about an Adolin death?
Now I am. Yeah.
Not yet. Not yet. I could see it. I guess I see them even more possibly. They won't be quite as much of a focus, but maybe, like beginning of like books, like a shocker towards the beginning of like book 6 or something, maybe. And that so
Yes.
it sets the tone for Shallan's arc for the back half. I kind of expect that there'll be a major. This is kind of one of those things. We know that there's 5 books and a time gap in 5 books, which kind of sets you up for some things. But I almost kind of expect there to be a confrontation with Odium that they think they win, but once again, they don't. And that's what kind of sets up the second half and that, that not all the characters will make it through it. Like I just have this feeling that Cal in some way is going to, I know some of these guys disagree with me. I think he's going to somehow get tied into the Oath Pact. That he takes a place on the Oath Pact. And that's going to be like one of his last ideals, is that he will protect people, even though like it'll cause him suffering through time or something. Like he'll have to skip out on saving people in the meantime while he's off dealing with Oath Pact stuff. But
yeah.
I don't know if I have a bold prediction. It's not very bold, but I've always just felt, I get the feeling that at the end of book 5 they'll lose the Odium, and then the second half of the story will be a climbing back up from that. But who knows?
Yeah.
Lose the Odium without the destruction of the world somehow. And maybe that builds on Cody's Oath Pact. Like they lose, but because of Kaladin becoming a new Oath Pact member, something like that. Even though that Oath Pact deal seems somewhat broken and not useful anymore.
Or maybe, since we haven't seen it yet, it could even be that they get pushed to Braze. Odium wins,
right?
And they get pushed to Braze, and then we finally get to see that world. But then it's also them trying to take back Roshar this time.
Yeah, I like that.
I just know that back half is going to be focused on what happened with the Heralds, so that's going to be a fun one, especially when we finally get Ash and Talon's flashbacks.
Yeah.
Those flashbacks kind of scare me a little bit, of how much they could be him getting tortured on.
Oh, definitely.
Grace. It's like, oh, poor man.
That man is officially the new Chuck Norris. Outside of Stormlight, I guess probably finding more hemalurgic constructs that they didn't think were possible in Era 2. Because we saw those chimeras and Shadows of Self, and then the set have obviously been messing with hemalurgy themselves as well. So,
right. So I have a question. How many of the characters that have died do you expect to see again at some point in the Cosmere? We already talked about Varen / Hoyd, obviously going to show up again. But are there other characters that have that we think are dead that we expect to see again?
I mean,
maybe character earlier series that will show up later. Go ahead, Morgan.
I was going to say, obviously, Spook is one of them that I'd like to see again, because it never said that he died. He just stepped down after 100 years.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'd second Spook, because it's a character you assume is dead, but you don't see dead. I mean, when people die, they do die. It's not like a Lord of the Rings type deal, Gandalf coming back. But yeah, except it is sometimes. It's kind of, jeez.
Not to mention Nalthis.
I mean, yeah, Nalthis.
And for Nalthis, right, which is in Warbreaker, where you have a whole system of magic where some people return from the dead, right? So this is not an uncommon thing to see in the Cosmere.
Right. On Nalthis, it's almost becoming reborn into a different person, because you have no memories of your previous self at the same time. As far as coming back from the death, I can't think of anything better than Spook.
Cody, you have any others?
I mean, I would love for Vin to come back, and he's kind of beat around the bush on if it's even at all possible, if we'll see her in the final battle situation or not. And that's about the only place I would expect her, is to be like some manifestation of power coming out of the spiritual realm, you know, in a final fight kind of situation. But not so much dead characters, but like characters that have only been like off-screen kind of characters, like Frost, you know, some of these characters that we know exist, we've heard little bits from, but you know, through their letters to Hoyt or whatever. But some of these characters making an appearance outside of the Yolan book, like doing some greater part.
Heck, I'd like to see some people from Cell as well. Raiden, or I'm so sad about her, Karada.
It occurs to me it might be interesting to see a sort of Heroes of the Horn kind of development, Cosmere wide, right, with characters that have died but were lived heroic lives coming back. I don't think that really fits into realmatic theory, but it would be. We do have cognitive shadows, at least. So
maybe Hoyd's flute is tied to the spiritual realm.
Now we're into the loony theories. I love it.
But where did
he got it off the Lord
it?
Ruler.
Another question. What is the funniest moment in all of the Cosmere that comes first to mind when you think of funny moments in the Cosmere?
How is Babby made? That I think Warbreaker is one of the funniest books, just because of the interactions there between the God King and Siri there. Yeah, like and just her like faking on the bed, like bouncing on the bed, and he's like, "What are you doing?" "Oh, nothing. I'm just bouncing on the bed, you know."
It's a funny book. Marta, how about you?
I'm top of my head. It's got to be Kelsier's interactions with Preservation or Fuzz.
Are you recruiting me?
How about you, Morden?
I would probably have to say my favorite scene that sticks out in my mind that's funny is Wayne helping out at the fried potato stand and just stealing the guy's money and then just like trading him back for. It was nuts.
Yeah, there are some really funny characters and moments in the entire series. I love like everything Light Song says in Warbreaker has me cracking up.
Yeah, one of my favorite pieces of fan art is a little comic strip someone did of when Light Song brings Hoyd to Siri to tell his story, and just like the way he draws Hoyd and then her facial reaction to turning around and seeing Hoyd dressed up in his goofy getup is just, it's one of my favorite pieces of fan art, and just embodies how funny that book is. Like,
so one sort of final question to close us off, you know, what is your, putting aside funniest scenes, like tell me about your favorite sort of scene or moment in all of the Cosmere so far, or a favorite if you can't rank them yet.
If I have to choose, Light Song realizing he was a god.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how many times I read or listen to that scene, it still hits me.
Marta?
I think the battle leading up to Vin's ascension. And Vin's ascension itself. I just think that's a glorious moment. Yeah.
Cody?
For me, it's definitely Dalinar going down to face Odium. And when Navani just sees him carrying his book, and he goes forward, and all he has with him is this book that he's clung to and has tried to define his life by at this point, redeem himself through, and just that moment, and then the "you may not have my pain" and reuniting the perpendicularity, just that sequence is so powerful. I just love it so much.
Yeah, there are some really tremendous sequences that you read again and again. I've certainly found I'll reread those sequences, but not necessarily other parts of the book. So you know those really, really well, and then others not so much. Those are all great ones. All right, that's going to really bring us to the end of our panel. Thank you so much, Cody, Murtaugh, and Morden, for joining us. Thanks to everyone who's been watching in the YouTube and sending in great questions. The next panel for Spoilercon is going to be at 1:30 Pacific time, and that is the What Aja fantasy characters. So join us to find out how fantasy characters from other series can get sorted into different Ajas in the Wheel of Time. So once again, thanks to all of you for joining us, and we will see you at the next event.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.